Katherine Hepburn finally breaks silence about Humphrey Bogart. Katherine Hepburn was born Katharine Hepburn on May 12, 1907 in Hartford, Connecticut. Her childhood was very different from most kids in nearly 1,900 seconds. Her parents had modern ideas. Her father, Dr. Thomas Norval Hepburn, was a doctor who helped people and wanted to make society better. And her mother, Katherine Martha Hepburn, was a famous woman who fought for women's rights and equal treatment. Young Katherine was told to think for herself, ask questions about rules, and not follow what everyone else did. This early teaching about learning, speaking your mind, and fairness shaped her brave personality and strong determination, things that would later show up in both her career and how people saw her. From when she was little, Hepburn had a strong will and a love for acting, often putting on plays with her brothers and sisters and showing a smart confidence that made her different from other kids. Hepburn went to Bryn Mawr College where she studied history and philosophy. It was during her college years that she began to really work on acting, appearing in student shows and practicing her skills on stage. After finishing school in 1928, she began working in theater. Though her early stage work was a mix of hope and rejection, the way she spoke clearly, her unusual beauty, and her bold way of acting at first made the people who hired actors unsure. She didn't fit the usual image of a quiet Hollywood actress. Yet, it was exactly those things. How athletic she was, her unapologetic uniqueness, and her refusal to fit in that eventually made her one of the most special performers in the entertainment world. Katherine Hepburn made her first movie in A Bill of Divorcement, 1932, alongside John Barrymore, and her powerful acting immediately got attention. Just a year later, she won her first Academy Award for Morning Glory, 1933, making her one of Hollywood's most promising new stars. However, her career soon fell trouble. In the late 1930s, she was called box office poison after several movies that didn't make money, a name that would have ended most careers. Hepburn was not someone who gave up because of public opinion. With her usual determination, she went back to the stage, starring in the Philadelphia Story, 1939, a play written just for her. She later got the movie rights and planned her own Hollywood comeback with the 1940 film version starring Cary Grant and James Stewart, a performance that changed her career and proved her amazing strength. Throughout the 1940s and 1950s, Hepburn built up her reputation as one of cinema's most talented actresses. She formed an amazing partnership on screen and a romance off-screen with Spencer Tracy, one of Hollywood's biggest male stars. Together they starred in 9 films, including classics such as Woman of the Year, 1942, Adam's Rib, 1949, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, 1967. Their chemistry was obvious. Marked by clever jokes, deep respect, and real emotions, though their relationship lasted over 20 years. It stayed private because Tracy was married and Hepburn, always private and loyal, never tried to make their romance public in a showy way. She once famously said, "I loved Spencer Tracy. He and I were together for 27 years, the happiest years of my life." As her career went forward, Hepburn became known not only for her unique voice and sharp intelligence, but also for playing strong, independent women, characters who often were like her own personality. Whether she was playing the fierce Eleanor of Aquitaine in The Lion in Winter 1968, for which she won her 3rd Academy Award, or the tough Ethel Thier in On Golden Pond 1981, which earned her her 4th and final Oscar, Hepburn always brought depth, humor, and respect to every role she played. She became the perfect example of honesty in Hollywood. An actress who refused to be controlled by studio bosses or made smaller by what people expected from women in her industry. Away from the camera, Hepburn was famously private and unusual. She avoided Hollywood social life, preferring to be alone, go sailing, play tennis, and take long walks in nature. She wore pants long before it was considered okay for women to do so, and she spoke her mind without holding back. Her fierce independence made her a role model for many generations of women who saw in her a symbol of strength, self-reliance, and being real. Despite her fame, she stayed down to earth and surprisingly honest, often rejecting the idea of being a star at all. "I never realized until lately that women were supposed to be the weaker sex," she once said, a quote that showed both her humor and her modern way of thinking. Katherine Hepburn married Ledlow Ogden Smith in 1928 during a time when she was still a young woman finding her way both in life and in her new career. Ledlow, often called Luddy, came from a wealthy Philadelphia family and was known for being refined, smart, and deeply caring toward Hepburn. Their marriage began at a time when Hepburn was still going to Bryn Mawr College and just starting to dream of a career on the stage, something that was unusual for women from her social background. Despite the love they shared, their marriage was one marked by differences in personality and lifestyle. Hepburn was fiercely independent, had big dreams, and was determined to make a place for herself in a world that often expected women to stay at home and do household tasks. Ledlow, though supportive, wanted a quieter, more traditional life. And Hepburn's love for acting began to take over her life. The gap between them grew bigger. Their relationship was, by all accounts, sweet, but ultimately didn't work out. Hepburn's career took her to New York, where she began performing in theater and later in Hollywood films, while Luddy's life stayed centered in the East Coast's wealthy social circles. Hepburn often spoke of feeling restless and yearned for freedom, feelings that did not fit easily into what marriage was at the time. She wanted adventure, challenge, and personal growth, while Lou wanted stability, companionship, and a shared home life. This basic difference became the quiet reason their marriage ended. Still, Hepburn respected Ledlow deeply and was grateful for the kindness and patience he showed her during their years together. She even convinced him to legally change his name to Ogden Ledlow, believing that her growing fame as Katherine Hepburn might cause confusion or embarrassment for him. A rare gesture of caring from someone so often described as self-willed and stubborn. Their divorce in 1934 after 6 years of marriage was friendly, and they remained close friends for the rest of their lives. An amazing example of filial love and mutual respect they shared. Hepburn never remarried, and in later interviews she often talked about how she was too independent for marriage, admitting that she hadn't been a good wife because she put her work and personal freedom above home life. Yet she never spoke of Ledlow with anything but warmth. She also said that he was one of the kindest men she had ever known and that he had treated her with great understanding during a time when she was still becoming who she was meant to be. In many ways, Ledlow represented a chapter of Hepburn's youth, one filled with idealism, romance, and trying new things that would eventually give way to the fierce independence that defined how people knew her. Their relationship also showed a more vulnerable and human side of Hepburn, one often hidden by her famous strong-willed image. Ledlow's steady, gentle nature was different from her restless spirit, and although their paths went separate ways, his influence stayed quietly throughout her life. Some people who write about her life have suggested that Hepburn's later avoidance of marriage and traditional home commitments came partly from her experience with Ledlow, that she learned through that early relationship that marriage was not the right place for her to succeed as an artist and an individual. Instead, she poured her energy into her acting, her smart interests, and her latter renewal long-term partnership with Spencer Tracy. In the end, the marriage between Katherine Hepburn and Ledlow Ogden Smith was a touching example of two good people whose lives moved in different directions. It wasn't a failure in the emotional sense, but rather a change, a necessary in Hepburn's journey toward finding herself and independence. While it lasted, it gave her love, support, and stability. And when it ended, it left her with no anger, only thankfulness. Ledlow remained a symbol of a gentler, more traditional love that in the end could not keep going, but always respected. Their story, quietly respectful and not touched by scandal, showed the grace with which both of them accepted life's changes. A rare kind of maturity that showed Katherine Hepburn's lifelong strength and honesty. For decades, Katherine Hepburn was known as one of the most fiercely independent, outspoken, and dignified women in Hollywood. A woman who rarely shared her personal feelings about anyone, especially her co-stars. Yet, when it came to Humphrey Bogart, the legendary actor with whom she was in the movie The African Queen, 1951, Hepburn's later thoughts carried a surprising mix of admiration, affection, and honest openness. When she finally broke her silence about Bogart, her words pulled back the professional image that had long defined her and showed a rare look into the respect and warmth she held for the man behind the legend. Bogey was a real man, Hepburn said in her direct New England way. There was nothing fake about him. What you saw on screen, that strength, That toughness, that cuivre, was exactly who he was. Hepburn was never one for overly sweet exaggeration, and her praise was always measured. But those words carried deep meaning. During the filming of The African Queen, she saw firsthand the unshakable professionalism and calm strength that made Bogart one of the most admired people in the business. The production filmed under harsh conditions in the Congo and Uganda, testing every cast and crew member to their limits. Yet Hepburn remembered Bogart as steady as a rock throughout, not complaining even when the heat, insects, and sickness wore everyone else down. Hepburn often compared Bogart's behavior with the Hollywood ideal of the spoiled star. He didn't play the hero, she recalled. He was one. Bogart's humility and work ethic impressed her deeply. He had no interest in being fake, no desire to dominate or show off. Bogey knew his craft, but he never talked about it. She said just did it. That was his way. Quiet, good at his job, and honest, their working relationship became one of mutual respect. And though their personalities were very different, her high-class New England manners against this cynical, tough guy charm, they balanced each other beautifully on screen. Hepburn later admitted that she learned from him the art of understatement. He showed me that you don't have to act every moment. Sometimes the power is in what you don't say. Behind the scenes, Hepburn grew to appreciate Bogart's loyalty to his wife, Lauren Beale, whom he lovingly called Baby. Bogey loved Beale with a kind of devotion that was rare in her busyness. Hepburn thought about. He carried himself like a man who knew exactly who it was and who he loved. This impressed Hepburn deeply, as she herself had a long and complicated relationship with Spencer Tracy, another married man. In Bogart, she saw honesty and emotional discipline, a man who could live in Hollywood without being swallowed up by it. He wasn't one of us in that sense, she said with a small smile. He was his own man, and that's what made him so very special. In her book, The Making of the African Queen, Hepburn shared personal details of the time they spent together in the jungle. She wrote with fondness about Bogart's humor, remembering how he and director John Huston kept spirits high with jokes and whiskey, even as stomach illness and swarms of mosquitoes bothered the crew. Bogey would grin and say, "Well, Kate, this is a fine way to make a living," she remembered, laughing at how ridiculous it all was. He had this wonderful ability to make light of hardship. He never let anything get to him. But Hepburn also showed a deeper truth that she admired Bart not only as a co-worker but as a man who showed authenticity in a town built on pretend. In a world where everyone was trying to be something, Bogey was happy to be himself. She said he was simple, direct, and that's why audiences trusted him. You couldn't fool people. They saw the real thing when they saw Bogey. After Bogart's death in 1957, Hepburn was deeply affected. She went to his funeral quietly, not wanting to draw attention, but her private thoughts revealed a sense of loss. When Boy died, she said softly, something honest went out of the world. For Hepburn, who valued honesty above all else, Bogart represented an era of straightforward decency that was beginning to fade. Looking back late in life, Hepburn summed up her feelings in a simple, touching way. Bogey was one of the good ones. No nonsense, no showing off, just truth. And truth, in our business, is the rarest thing of all. Her words, controlled yet heartfelt, carried the weight of genuine affection. In breaking her silence, she gave the world not a mythic portrait of Humphrey Bogart, the movie star, but a deeply human one, a man who in her eyes was every bit as noble, tough, and real as the character she played. She lived a long and productive life. She suffered from several health problems during the last few years of her life and died due to cardiac arrest at the age of 96 in 2003. Her mortal remains were buried at Cedar Hill Cemetery in Hartford.